All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the Fireside Chat. Our two guests at this time, one's an entrepreneur and our deputy CISO, and the other's our EVP, our Marine veteran and CISO as well. Please give it up for Adam Ely, Jerry Geisler, and our moderator, the amazing Regina Grayer.
Thank you so much, AJ. Can everyone hear me? Awesome. Did someone say no? How's everyone enjoying SparkCon? All right, so that was a little weak. But I understand everybody is eating lunch, so no worries. So thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to be here myself, so excited to be moderating such an esteemed panel. So thank you so much, Jerry and Adam, for your time. We're going to start with asking Jerry and Adam a few questions that inquiring minds want to know. And after, we'll have a few minutes to open this up to the audience. Sound good? All right. That still was a little weak. Come on, guys. Like we just begged you. Thank you. All right. So with that being said, Jerry, how about we start with you?
All right.
So can you talk a little bit about your career and the steps that led you to the position of Executive Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer?
I appreciate the promotion. I'm not an executive vice president. I caught that from AJ too. So, hey,
so I blame AJ. He said EVP.
It's all good. So for those of you that have wandered back in from lunch, thanks for coming back. This will probably be the least useful session for you of the day. I think my team felt obligated to put me on stage since I write the checks for the event. But hopefully we can share some things with you maybe that you do find useful. It will certainly not be as technically interesting as our first couple speakers, which were awesome, by the way. So big shout out to our speakers so far. I'm always so impressed with the level of talent that we get up here on this stage. It's really, really inspiring. So what was your question again? Talk about my career.
Tell us about your career.
Not nearly as interesting as the first two speakers. So I've been with Walmart for 28 years, which is a long time. In fact, I just made a joke that I've been with the company 3 years already when Adam was born. It's not true, but it's probably not too far off. I actually started with the company running a cash register in my local store right out of high school. And then I joined the Marine Corps, which I think AJ mentioned. Served in the Marine Corps for 8 years. Came back to the company, went back to college. Didn't have any aspirations of moving into tech at that time. Did a number of things for the company over the years. And then 15 years ago, decided I wanted to move into technology. And that's the great thing about this company is if you have a track record of performance and you can demonstrate some level of aptitude, which I guess I demonstrated probably just enough. I moved into technology as an engineer. And I will tell you, I thought it was the biggest career mistake I had ever made for the first 18 months. I had complete imposter syndrome. I listened to the engineers on both sides of my desk and kept thinking, I do not belong here. I had a big learning curve, like I think all of us do when we first decide to move into tech. You start to realize just how much you don't know. But thankfully, I had very patient engineers that I worked with, and I learned a lot from them. And that's really been the key for me, is to be committed to lifelong learning. And I've heard a couple of our speakers talk about it already today of don't decide you just don't know something, just start and start learning. I think the other key to building a career, especially if you shift out of an engineering type role or a technologist, pure technologist role, and you move into a leadership role, the real key then becomes surrounding yourself with the right people, building the right teams, bringing in people, and it's somewhat cliche, but it's absolutely true, bring in people that are better than you. It's one of the reasons I brought Adam in. He's a smarter guy than I am. I've done that with every team that I've ever built, and that really makes a difference.
That is great insight.
Can I add one thing to that?
Of course.
I just want to draw a thread through something Jerry said to show people kind of where opportunity exists in the world. Jerry said he started out as a cashier in his local store. Now Jerry is the SVP, and CISO of the largest company in the world. Like, that is a crazy opportunity and shows you can literally go from any position to any other position. So I just wanted to make sure that point is not lost upon people.
Great. Well, Adam, that definitely segues into my very next question, which is, tell us a little bit about your career journey.
So I have a somewhat atypical path. So I graduated high school earlier, actually went to college early. I got into tech around that time, worked full-time while I was going through college. I think I dropped out of college 5 or 6 times. My parents bribed me to go back to college. Bribes worked when I was 19, but that got me on the right path. And from there, I've spent most of my career in enterprise security, working at a number of companies building or rebuilding security teams. But prior to Walmart, I left enterprise security for a while. There were some problems that I wanted to solve. There were some skill sets I wanted to learn. So I left enterprise security and I founded a mobile security startup out in Silicon Valley, where I live. I ran that company for about 4 years. It was acquired, and then I had to kind of figure out, what do I want to do next? And that's when got to talking to Walmart, and I said, hey, there's something really interesting that's going on in cybersecurity and tech in general in Walmart. And Walmart is doing these big moves with all these acquisitions and kind of changing their business model. This is really interesting. Hey, I think I want to go do that. And it's been 3 years this month since I joined the company.
It's amazing. So it's always interesting to hear what attracts people to Walmart. So we have a lot of people in this room today who are either interested in a career in cybersecurity, or they are already cybersecurity professionals and they are looking to advance their careers. What advice would you give yourself if you were starting your career today? Jerry, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think if I was starting my career today, and the advice that I'd give to anybody else, so information security it's such a broad term, and it applies to so many different domains and disciplines. I think the first thing is find what you're really interested in and dive into that. Because if you find something you're interested in, that's how you start becoming a subject matter expert in something. When you become a subject matter expert in something, then you start to see how the dots connect, and your breadth eventually starts to grow. Doug McMillan, our CEO, started actually his career very similar to how I did. He was a forklift driver in one of our warehouses. And I was at an event where someone asked him, how did you go from driving a forklift to being the CEO of the Fortune 1 company of the world? And he paused and he thought about it. So I knew he didn't have a canned answer to give, but his answer was absolutely brilliant, and I think it applies to this question and really any career, whether it's technology or otherwise. He said, I just raised my hand a lot. And I thought, that's so simple, but it's brilliant, and it certainly applies in our space. If you want to grow your career, be willing to raise your hand a lot. You're going to learn something every time you do.
Amazing. What about you, Adam?
My advice is similar to kind of what Jerry said that Doug said. It's be open to opportunity and follow those paths that interest you, but that also seem like they may be a little hard for you as well. So push yourself to learn, and don't always stay rigid to one set path, one set vision. Kind of flow a little bit to your destination, and be open to saying yes to kind of what's coming by, because that's how you meet more people, that's how you gain more knowledge, that's how you find new opportunities, that's how you really sort of progress yourself and then set yourself up for a position in the future where you can do just about anything that you want.
Great advice. So, Jerry, I'll pose another one for you. Over the past few years, Walmart has been rapidly transforming. We're using data and technology to serve customers in a variety of ways. And we're becoming more and more digital in every aspect of our enterprise and how we work and operate. So question, how are we adapting in information security, our strategy to support that transformation?
A good question. So Walmart has some unique assets, both in terms of our physical footprint, our logistics network, and our e-commerce operations. Not to mention, how we span the globe. And if leveraged correctly, as the company goes through a transformation, that turns into a real competitive advantage. Walmart's always had strong competitors, and candidly, I think we're better when we have a really strong competitor that everybody's paying attention to. And I don't have to name that competitor, obviously, but it makes us a better company. It makes us work harder. It makes us hungrier. That drives speed on the business side. And I think as security practitioners, we have to understand that. And we have to understand where the business is at, where the business is headed, and where it ultimately wants to be. And we have to figure out how we enable that. I think a lot of times security departments in particular get tagged with being the department of no. And for most of us, our companies aren't in the security business. Security is a necessity, but it's not why we exist. Why we exist is to deliver the core mission of whatever our company is that we decide to put our time toward. So we always have to be working to tie back our area's mission or goals to supporting the larger corporate mission. And that's where I think information security teams get tagged with being the department of no instead of how. And again, I know that sounds cliche, but you have to accept the underlying premise that for business, those things that drive value for the business are almost always going to be the same things that drive risk in our space. So we have to figure out how do we balance that equation so that we're not letting the business take on unnecessary risk that would be material if that risk were to materialize, but that while doing that, we're still allowing the business to move fast. Now, that's not to say don't draw a line in the sand when you know that the answer really does need to be no. And in some cases, it does. But there's almost always an alternative path that can be brought forward.
I don't know if it was Neil Ash or Doug McMillan that kind of phrased the quote, it's not always about no, but how. So how do we do things in a very secure manner? So great reminders there. Adam, let's talk about e-commerce for a second. Since Walmart's acquisition of Jet.com in 2016, we've acquired several digitally native e-commerce brands. Can you talk a little bit about how Walmart is implementing measures to strengthen their security posture?
Yeah. I think in 2 years, we've acquired 16 companies, and then I think we've launched another, let's call it 6 on top of that, that we started from kind of the ground up, but outside of our walls through our innovation program. So they're kind of Walmart-owned, but independent operated companies. That's put a lot of stress on our teams, and we've had to sort of figure out a new way to do it because we're doing it at a more rapid pace than most companies are. And our acquisitions or our starting of new companies, they don't fit one model. We have companies that we buy that we will run 100% separate from this company. Other than just having ownership in it, you would not really associate it with us from an operation standpoint or brand standpoint. We have others that are quasi-integrated, and we have others that will just be fully integrated. So first we had to define those models and say, how do we try to secure or bring the maturity of the security of each of those entities up to a level that our customers, our shareholders, and just us as associates would want to see. So we started off by defining that and what that looked like for each of those models. And then we said, okay, how do we shortcut this? How do we find the path where we can raise the maturity and the defense levels as fast as possible while we're maturing the overall organization? This is where we sort of stepped outside of the normal lines happens a bit, and we have an audit team that we send in, our assessment team that we set in, and we assess the organizations, we find their maturity. But in parallel to that, we also will often have our red team start to launch engagements against these organizations as well. And the idea here is we get this two-pronged approach. We get one that says, hey, let's really look at all of the environmental controls, all of the maturity, the policies, everything for this organization, but let's also do real-world testing. Let's actually get in there, and then let's debrief them and say, look, we took the path that is most likely for attackers against this organization. Let's prioritize these things that we're seeing. So it's a little bit of rolling up our sleeves and just getting in there and doing that hard technical work, and it's a bit of the hard assessment work that, just pulling back the layers of the onion, but also really understanding who are each of these entities, how are we going to operate them, and can we as a core organization to scale our global solutions to meet the demands of each of these types of entities wherever they might be around the world. And that's the last piece I sort of skipped over, is we started to transform our security organization into a services group so that we can onboard these companies even faster before they're fully integrated.
Perfect, and important to know as we continue to make these acquisitions. So I think it's appropriate. I think we have about 6 minutes left, and I think it's appropriate to end my portion before we open it up to the audience with this final question that I'll pose to you both. So we've talked a lot about many things, many topics with our speakers today. And so what does, in both of your opinions, what does the future of security look like? And what emerging trends are you watching in your roles?
Well, my answer is chaos. I think we're just going to see more chaos in the future. No, I think I think we're at a really interesting inflection point. Like, this is the best time to be in this industry, frankly. It's, for many years we've all asked for funding and board attention, and now we all have it. And now there's a lot of focus on it. So I think in the coming years we're going to see a lot more regulation. We're going to see a lot more criminal activity that gets even better. I mean, we're seeing some amazing skilled attackers out there. I think I recently was talking to somebody and said, some of these attack groups, I want to go meet them somewhere. Like, I want to meet them somewhere where there's no extradition and I can go sit and talk to them, because professionally, I respect their abilities. I think we're going to continue to see them get better. We're going to see regulation come even more. And then that's going to drive more discipline and more innovation for our types of groups, for protection and assessment groups within the enterprise. And that's kind of what I'm watching right now, is where's that innovation, who's coming up with it, and what's that next thing that's right there on the edge.
What are your thoughts, Jerry?
Yeah, so I think you're pretty spot on with that answer. The thing that struck me is I went out to RSA this year, and we're always surprised by just how many more companies have appeared in our space. And when I realized that not only had the hall gone from one floor but to 2 floors full of companies offering security solutions that will solve all of our problems, but it had actually filled in the center as well, it occurred to me that the industry right now is really all over the place, and it's difficult to figure out what's real and what's smoke and mirrors. And what are the problems that really need to be solved? I thought the first presentation from Geisler with Microsoft, when he was going through the machine learning and using that on the defender side, I think the reality is, and as Adam just alluded to, you're going to see that same level of capability in leveraging machine learning from the adversaries. If we can do it on our side, it's certainly going to be leveraged for not so great things by others. So I think we have to realize that we're not going to get to a point where we really start to solve the things that we've always dealt with. It's going to get noisier, and adversaries are going to become more efficient and more effective and even more sophisticated than what we've seen in the past. I think security within the enterprise itself is largely going to be shaped as it's always been shaped, and it's really going to be based on the direction of your business and what is being driven by the consumer markets. And I don't mean that in any negative sense, but it goes back to the answer that I gave earlier is, we're all here to really ensure that we're not only just protecting our enterprise, but that we are, at some level, enabling our enterprises to do the work in a secure environment, in a secure manner. In terms of things that we're watching, there's a lot going on in the legislative and regulatory environments that are going to fundamentally change how I think we have to approach cybersecurity. Certainly reporting obligations are going to get greater. Penalties are going to get greater. We saw that already with GDPR, and we're certain that we're going to see similar things here in the United States and elsewhere around the world. So the stakes are being raised. While those stakes are being raised, we're seeing the new models start to emerge, both in terms of technology and then how that technology is leveraged by adversaries. So we obviously hear a lot about the emergence of the Internet of Things. Go look at any one of those Internet of Things that's running an open operating system, and you'll be amazed at just how much attack surface exists in things like that. So we saw it last year with the Mirai botnet that hit all the IoT devices. I think we're going to continue to see more things like that, especially as consumers deploy these IoT devices across the entire continuum of their lives.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I found that extremely insightful. So let's everyone give a round of applause for Jerry Geisler and Adam Ely, SVP and Chief Information Security Officer and VP Deputy CISO. So I think now we will open it up to questions from the audience. If you'll go to a mic, we're ready.
We get less questions than everybody else, apparently.
I did say this would be the least useful talk of the day, so I'm not surprised by the lack of questions.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Devi Shri. I live in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you for this panel. It was very insightful. I recently graduated and working my way through information security. My question to you all is, it's very noisy world, like in information security. What to pick, what not to pick. You apply for security engineering, and there is so much domain inside it. Recruiter asks, what are you interested in, passionate? And when you are in pursuing like 3 to 4 internships and millions of domain, how do you answer this question that what you are mostly passionate about when you have not done enough? And it's so much, as I have heard you all talking about, like there are so many diverse aspects of information security. It's not limited to computer science only. It's limited to social engineering. It's related to criminology. It's related to history. It's related to anything. And people are very, very smart who are in opponent and this side. How do you answer like what you are passionate about when you are looking for a next opportunity, or even if somebody is asking what you have done? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to take that one?
I think it's going to be different for every individual. Certainly when I started my information security career, I wasn't quite sure where I might navigate to, but I think it goes back to having an openness or a willingness to step into spaces that maybe you don't have a deep body of knowledge in, to try and get onto projects or initiatives where you see an opportunity to add value in some way, but maybe you aren't perfectly qualified for that project or that initiative. I think you'll be surprised that just putting forth the willingness to engage in something that maybe isn't your core is going to open up opportunities. And as you do that, if you adopt that mindset of being willing to move into spaces other than maybe where you sit today, that's where you have the opportunity to find something that maybe you enjoy even more. But at the same time, I would tell you, even when you find that thing that you say, yes, this is my passion, this is where I want to be, don't close yourself down to the idea of maybe 5 years from now, you're going to find something that you like even more than what you're doing today. So it's really more of a journey, certainly, than a destination, and you may never hit that destination. Look for the growth opportunities, and you're going to find those pockets that really resonate with you, in my experience.
Thank you.
Hello, I have a question. So my name is Karen Rhodes. I'm the Chief Technologist for HPE. And I'm wondering, what is Walmart doing to help guide the legislation that's being put around cybersecurity so that it's actually effective? We've had a lot of cybersecurity laws that have been put in place with the best of intention and the worst of repercussions for all of us in the technology industry. How are you guys approaching that?
Yeah. So this is actually one of my favorite spaces, probably, trying to understand kind of legislation and what's going on and what we can do. So there's a number of folks. Actually, I thought I saw one in the room. I was going to point them out, but I don't see them now. But we have a number of folks that spend a lot of time with industry groups, just various standards bodies, all the way to local, politicians and into DC, understanding what concerns are out there and working to do education. So I believe personally that one of the best things that we can do as an organization, especially a well-resourced organization as part of the community, is to educate. Just like I need my finance peers to educate me on new tax laws and things that come out, or my legal staff that's in privacy to tell me about all the laws around the world, we have to do our part to also educate all the other industries, get outside of our echo chamber, if you will, every now and then, and educate others about what are the true threats that are out there and how should we go about them, and how has previous legislation worked around the world, right? Because we can't really look at just the U.S. When you look at around the world and say what's been good or bad. So I think one of the best things that we've done is really that education and spending time in all the various groups and circles, and again, outside of our own immediate echo chamber, to really educate people on what needs to be done out there and what we're seeing working and not working.
Thank you.
Great question. Any other questions?
I had one. It's funny because she asked the exact question that I was going to ask. Are you guys subject to the DFS 500 in New York? So New York State was the first state to codify cybersecurity requirements for all financial services firms. And to say it's been a train wreck is an understatement. So to her point, they need people like you to tell them how to write the laws in the first place. Where we're coming from is the small business. 40% of the time when they get hacked, they're just done. So all you enterprise guys, you have these whole teams, but we think that the small businesses don't have access to, they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so we're not regulated under the in FISERV, because that's not our core area and that's not our business. But I think you make a great point about the small companies don't necessarily have the voice and the influence. I think is part of the point that you were making there. And having laws written in the right way, not only to protect the consumers out there, but to help those small companies and make sure that the laws are going in the right way so it's not overly burdensome for them, is kind of a very interesting point. And that's a lot of the education that I think, frankly, large companies, many large companies do, is trying to get out there and educate the folks that are making those policies to help them drive them in the right way.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes for questions, maybe 2 more.
I knew it. I knew it.
You knew it the second I sat down there, didn't you? Hi, my name's Tim. You might know me. I think we all want to know how Jerry's career was influenced being a Marine and a good ooh-ah.
So what was the question?
You guys heard me, right? We want to know how the Marines made you better at your job. How did your time there help?
He also said in a good hoo-ah.
That's right. No, not hoo-ah. He's not Army.
Oh, good.
There we go.
What did you say, Tim?
Ooh-ah.
Oh, sorry.
It is different.
Sorry.
Those who know, they care.
We do. It's an interesting question because the first place that I learned leadership was the Marine Corps. And when I came off of active duty and I came back to Walmart and moved into a leadership role, my frame of reference for leadership was how I led Marines. Didn't translate. So to that end, it ultimately served to make me a better leader because outside of the military hierarchy, I was not a good leader. So I had to learn. And it taught me to learn how to use influence to lead. And even when I didn't have title or position or rank, as I had in the Marines, I still had to get a job done. So it taught me how better to interrelate and influence. So that was a muscle that I didn't have to develop in the Marine Corps. If I had more stripes than you, that's all that mattered. It doesn't work that way outside of that. I think beyond that, probably the one attribute that the Marine Corps instilled in me that has served me better than anything else is discipline. And in fact, Tim, you've been in my office several times, and I have a quote up on the top of my whiteboard, that speaks directly to discipline, and that discipline is what allows us to avoid regret. Are you clapping because that was the end or because I said something good?
It's because you said something good. We still have 2 more minutes.
I know we have somebody over here.
I thought I saw someone over here wanting a question. Last question.
Hello? Yes. This is kind of more of an esoteric question, I guess. Was in computer security or whatever you want to call it for a while, and then I step away for, say, like 10 years. And I come back, and I go, admin still works everywhere. Do you think that we will get to a future where we can somehow stop relying on configurations or an installation plan to keep us safe from admin? A future that's not here yet, right? Does anybody see that? Because 10 years later, it's like the front door's still open. I left because it felt like it was getting closed. Okay, everything's good. But now it's like, to your point, there's more holes than ever.
Yeah, I think the fact that there's more holes than ever actually shows kind of the evolution of technology and also the evolution of people looking for problems, which in turn shows the value of the security space and how it's grown, right? So when I started in the industry, we had less vulnerabilities coming out on a day-to-day basis. We had less malware infections. They were kind of unheard of. There was a few here or there that would happen. Now we're seeing them constantly. That's evolution. That's growth, right? And so as you have more attention to a space, you're naturally going to see more problems. Now, on the flip side of that, though, the investment that we're seeing companies make in security has changed. And I know it's easy to sit there day to day and go, oh, nobody listens and nobody invests, but the amount of money and brute force that's being put against security across the board at most companies today eclipses anything we've ever seen in history. So I would answer it as we are on the right path finally.
I agree.
Yeah, and we are finally seeing people say, oh, this security thing is important. Now, frankly, and look, this is going to be a little controversial. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, did a breach matter, right? Some people say yes. Some people will say no, right? It goes back and forth. But the fact is that so many companies weren't digital in nature at one time that breaches were very minimal impact. Now they're catastrophic, right? So now people are looking at that risk and they're pouring more money into it and they're thinking about it more and more. Admin, I don't know. That might just be a problem we have forever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean.
But I think the core of that question and
yeah,
core of my point
there.
is I think we're getting better, and we're definitely going on the right path.
Cool. Thank you.
I'm curious about a quick overview of how GDPR affected Walmart. Because, I mean, as a global corporation, I mean.
Yeah, so GDPR doesn't actually fall into our direct area of responsibility, but we certainly have been significantly involved in it. For a company like Walmart, and really a lot of large enterprises that have very significant data stores that are going to be subject to GDPR, what you really had to do was take a step back and look more fundamentally across the entirety of your enterprise. So you couldn't just look at your operations that were in the EU, especially since the penalties went for total global revenue rather than just what your revenue might be in the EU. So when you looked at the potential for fines and sanctions, it very quickly became a material financial risk for the organization. So you had to put commensurate resources against it in order to position your company as best you could. So we started the GDPR journey probably 3.5 years ago and had entire teams dedicated to getting us to a point where the regulators would say, yes, we agree with what you're doing and you're doing the right things. But we had to look much more broadly than that. We had to say, okay, let's assume that the rest of the world is going to bring online a GDPR-like regulation. So let's just go ahead and start doing that body of work now because, one, it's the right thing to do. And then secondarily, we're much better positioned than we were when GDPR first started to come online and made everybody take a step back and say, what's the implication of this? Because you don't want to have to go through those disruptive exercises multiple times. So that was our approach of let's fix it for the entire enterprise.
I agree. That's been our approach. Have you felt that anything was out of line there, or do you think it's good? I mean, consumer privacy and all that it entails.
I think it's an evolving space. Every day we read articles on both sides of the fence in terms of privacy, especially, and as it relates to consumers of, do consumers care, do they not care? But their behaviors in many ways suggest that they don't care. But when you have a security incident, they very much care. So I think the way that we have to approach it is really not based on what this article says or what that article says, but really what does the law require of us? And then really becomes ethically, what is right, what is the right thing to do, especially for those people that have either chosen to work for your company or have chosen to transact with your company. What's the right thing to do in terms of being good stewards of the data that they've entrusted you with?
I think when you look at it ethically, I think that's what you find, right? The law falls second and everything falls into place.
Great question. Thank you.
Thank you. So I know we are out of time, and so thank you so much, Adam and Jerry. Please give them a round of applause. Everyone, enjoy the conference, and may the 4th be with you.